Hello and welcome to another New Catholic Generation panel discussion. My name is Joseph, also known as the Catholic Apologist. I'm joined by Aimee, April Grace. Over on my far right, we have Marc, our special guest. We have Zaira, our production manager, and Tristan, Catholic for Christ. So I'm going to first be posing this question to you guys. First, what is your race and ethnicity?
I guess I will start. So I am biracial. My father is African American. My mother is French Canadian.
I am Mexican.
I am 75% Puerto Rican and 25% Southern Baptist. I actually don't know what my I don't know the ethnicity of my grandmother, but when she met my grandfather, she was Southern Baptist. She's Catholic now, so I always say 75% Puerto Rican, 25% Southern Baptist.
Cool. And I am part Native American and part Hispanic. I have Comanche on my mom's side and Apache on my dad's side.
So, in your own words, kind of to get this conversation going, how would you guys define race and ethnicity?
I would say race is more of like a genetic, origin point. So, whether or not your genes come more from Africa or South America or Europe. And ethnicity is more of a cultural understanding of that racial origin.
That's actually a pretty good definition. I took a sociology class, and there's a sociological definition, which I would say is pretty accurate to what you mentioned.
Nice.
Yeah, which is how both Marc and I are Hispanic, which I would say would be more of the racial. But our ethnicity, our ethnicity would be Hispanic, but I would be considered Caucasian, and I don't know that he would. Probably more towards Native American.
Mm-hmm. Probably.
Okay.
Just because of the color of skin.
Mm-hmm. So to continue this conversation, I think it's important that we talk a little bit about how this topic of race and ethnicity has affected you guys in your lives. So, Aimee, I'll start with you. How has this affected you?
Well, occasionally I'll get questions like, are you mixed? Or I'm sure every one of us in some way or shape or form has been asked what are you? Or what's your racial or whatever background? And so I've never been afraid of being oh yeah, well I'm biracial. I'm a mix of African American and basically white French Canadian. And so just my mother has blonde hair. And my father is just African American, just they're completely two different races, and I am smack dab in between, and I think it's really cool to just be a mix of the two. But growing up, I guess I identified more with white, and I didn't really have that close of a relationship with my African American side, and I didn't really. There were little bits and pieces of where I would really be extra appreciative of African American things because I felt that with music. I just feel they're so soulful and it really speaks to me and I just love that. And it wasn't until I think it was last year, actually, I met family on my father's side because I'm actually adopted. And that's a completely different story. But I met family on my father's side and I just really felt a sense of connection and in a way that I hadn't expected before. And so it was really cool because part of it is I have more family, which is great because my adoptive family is much more small in terms of relatives and the family itself. And so just expanding that is a joy, but also recognizing that I have a whole cultural history behind me that I'm just starting to uncover is something that's really exciting for me.
I haven't experienced any racial attacks or any really negative thing, but I grew up being really aware of the fact that I was pretty much the only Hispanic person outside of my family that I knew. It was either I went to a high school that was predominantly black, and then I went to Franciscan, which is the exact opposite.
Predominantly white.
Yeah, and so I was all too aware that I was Hispanic, and not only from just looking around me, but the fact that other people kept on bringing it up to me. So, yeah.
Yeah, I would say that my experience was more that people didn't believe my race and ethnicity because I am what is known as a Hispanic passing as white because of the color of my skin. So usually when people would hear my name, they'd be like, "Oh, what's that from?" And I'd be like, "Well, I'm Puerto Rican." They're like, "No, you're not." And then once they accepted that I was Hispanic, they're like, "Oh, so you like tacos?" And I'm like, "That's Mexicans. That's not Puerto Ricans."
And I'm more of a quesadilla kind of guy.
But to me, it was more of like that either people didn't accept my ethnicity or they assumed I was a different like cultural identity altogether just because apparently all Hispanics, Latinos are Mexican. That's the stereotype I experienced the most, which was frustrating.
I totally can like really relate to that because my last name is Escobar, and for some of you guys don't know, there's a famous Escobar named Pablo Escobar. And he's not the best person, not at all. But everyone keeps on asking me when they find out who my last name is and they know about this guy, if I'm related to him. And I have to be like, no, he's Colombian. And without fail, they'll ask, there's a difference? And I'll be like, yes.
For me, I mean, honestly, growing up, I didn't really notice a big difference, mostly because, like, yeah, the neighborhood I was raised around was predominantly white. Like, it was a pretty good mix. I'm from Denver, Colorado, and like the school I went to for grade school, it was actually a bilingual school. So we were taught in English and in Spanish. Yeah, it was really neat. But because of that, there was like almost equal parts, like Mexican and Hispanic as well as white. And like the teachers would like be bilingual. They would have to give the lessons sometimes in English, sometimes in Spanish. For like assemblies for parents there, they would give it in like Spanish first and then English. So I just never really kind of noticed a stark difference when it came to actual color of the skin. Like I remember I can call back playing with friends in the street and like all of them were white, and then like all of a sudden like someone would make a comment and it wasn't like racist or in bad taste or anything like that, but like I just kind of have this visual of like looking down and kind of like noticing the color of my skin and like looking around like, oh yeah, I am the only one here that's like colored. But yeah, and growing up, I would notice it more, and there's a stereotype that like darker skinned people are like more athletic or something like that, or have certain stereotypes and stuff like that. But and being an athlete, that's what I would experience predominantly the most, is that the darker you were, the faster you were, the higher you could jump. And I can tell you that I have hops, but it's because I work for them. It's not. It's because I squat. So, yeah, but yeah, that's how I've experienced it. So.
Okay.
I thought of two major things in my life that I had to deal with. And one was how I noticed, especially in like 6th grade, we were doing our like, make your family crest. And I'm like, I don't even know like what my background is. All I know is that my father's African American and my mother is white. And I don't even know like where that comes from, or how that's broken up. And so just always like, oh, well, I'm Italian, and oh, I'm Polish, or I have like Spanish blood or something, and just like not knowing where exactly I came from, like what's my background. And so just like it was hard to get in contact with them only because like I was trying to use email and I didn't have an email, or I didn't know their phone number and I didn't take the time to ask my mom to call them, or didn't know what time. I eventually found out because I mentioned. But another thing was with my hair. A lot of times when I was growing up, my mom did my hair. I wanted from like a young age for it to be straight, which I think a bunch of people kind of go through that. But the hairdresser I went to used like whatever she used, but there is very different hair care for people with what they would call ethnic hair like this. Mm-hmm. It's curly. You treat it differently than you do like Caucasian hair. And so to not have that insight, my hair became very damaged because my scalp was very sensitive. And so it wasn't until I think late high school that I actually went to someone with ethnic hair care, and she was able to do a really good job with my hair. She helped me get the right products to make it look nice. I was able to like experiment and stuff and like accept and embrace everything my hair can do instead of trying to make it look like everybody else's. So that was a huge part of my
I would almost say that that's like a something that, I mean, I'm sure some guys do, but like for females with race and ethnicity like background, like my hair is pretty decent now, but like when I was younger, like it was like frizzy kinky here, it was curly up here, it was wavy in the back and straight underneath. Like I was raised being told beauty is pain because that was the only way to make my hair look normal was to burn my scalp as I blow dried it. So like that was like something that like it's very true. You don't think about it when you have perfectly straight hair or if your hair is always curly but it's Caucasian hair. Like yes, my hair looks Caucasian, but to be Puerto Rican, it's typically a mixture of Spaniard, African slaves, and Native American Indians. So like that's I have more of the African hairstyle with more of the Spaniard skin.
Going a little bit deeper into this, I want to talk about what you feel, how you experience it when these situations come across. Because for me, I'm obviously I'm the only
minority.
Yeah, on this panel, and so kind of trying to like see this through your guys' eyes and get a feel for what you guys see. But I know growing up for me, I grew up in Florida, Central Florida area. It's a very diverse area. On top of that, my godfather, he's from the islands. I have friends, not only including you guys, but some other friends that are different ethnicities. Growing up, I never understood how somebody could be racist. I never understood where the logic was behind it. I thought it was the dumbest idea ever. In fact, the only kind of actual racism I ever experienced in real life was because there's such a diversity where I grew up. I experienced people of different ethnicities being racist towards me. And I've had actually family have that kind of happen too. One situation being where a relative of mine was in a store, actually knew some Spanish because of the situation where she was married into. The woman in front of her in the line was speaking to the cashier. They were friends. They're speaking in Spanish. And, they were, I believe they were Puerto Rican from what she told me. And so but they started talking bad about her, and because of her being white, because she's my aunt and she's directly related. Well, she knew what they were saying. Oh. So that happened. But anyway, so I think of that, I'm just like, why would you do that? So for you guys, I'm wondering how that feels for you.
I don't understand it because I don't feel any different, and I don't understand how people, I view racism as a hate thing, where it's like they don't know, and it's a difference thing.
Yeah, people are afraid of what they don't know.
Yeah, and then because of that fear, kind of like the Star Wars, it turns into hatred. And so I never really understood it because I feel that racism is just hate, and it's an unnecessary hate. And I don't think racism of either kind towards a minority just because they are a minority, or talking bad about white people because they assume you when you go home and you're just surrounded by white people, you talk bad about minorities. I kind of feel like that's the case, and I don't understand it. For lack of a better phrase, it makes me sad.
Yeah.
I would say that I'm in a unique position because I am a minority, but I don't look it. So when my majority friends find out I'm a minority, they tend to ask questions, and they try to learn about my culture. And that allows an opportunity for growth and acceptance of diversity. And then when my other minority friends learn that I'm Hispanic, they're like, oh, you're one of me too. You're also a minority. Let's be friends. So it's I get the unique opportunity to be accepted by both sides, which allows me to kind of also agree with Marc. I don't understand why there is racism, just because to me it's you're a person, I'm a person,
right?
And,
Right.
you know, like, if you just ask a question, if you have a question, if you're afraid or you're concerned or you're wondering why this is a stereotype or why people say that thing just because of the color of your skin, like, ask the question and you'll learn and you won't make that mistake later down the road. And
If you
help.
do it, if you ask the question politely and without,
definitely do it correctly.
like
Yeah.
But I mean, I was also raised in a military family, so like we moved all the way like from Maine down to Puerto Rico and over to New Mexico at one point. So like I'm used to like a wide variety of diversity. So to me, like I didn't even believe racism was a thing until like the past couple of years when I started seeing like all this hate in the media, and I'm just like, why? I mean,
Right.
some like in my experience there are some people of color who have more of a internal white cultural ideal and cultural experience, and there are some white people who have an internal like African American life experience. And so like just because the color of your skin doesn't determine like who you are as a person. And so to me it's like you can have a white thug and a black lawyer, and that doesn't mean that either one of them are bad, but it doesn't mean that either one of them are good based on the color of their skin.
Yeah, going off of that, a lot of it I think is not so much fear of the color of the skin, but associating the color of the skin with the culture that it's from predominantly. And you know, stereotypes are there for a reason. It could be because the majority of the people with the color of that skin act a certain way, but it's also like it could be the problem with the culture also. Like that's what I found out. And yeah, I think you guys kind of hit it on the head when it's like when you said that it's kind of not knowing. It's fear out of what you don't know. And sometimes, you know, I imagine it possibly could be jealousy or like just wanting to experience that, and maybe they receive some form of rejection, or they're afraid they'll be rejected by that community for whatever reason, you know. And so I think it's important for us, you know, to a certain degree, you know, to be open to explaining, you know, those things to people who have questions, you know, as long as, like you said, they ask appropriately.
Yeah.
And yeah, just being open about like who you are, where your culture comes from, what it means to your culture, and hopefully it'll generate a lot less, you know, tension, a lot less anxiety when someone encounters a situation that they're not familiar with.
I think definitely with associating a person's race with their, you know, the background and such. Like, I'm thinking back to learning about racism was learning about Martin Luther King Jr. and how he was, you know, a figurehead of the anti-racism movement. And because African Americans had typically, you know, gone from being imported as slaves to earning their freedom, but not having it completely, and just kind of going up to the point where Martin Luther King was just like, hey, this is wrong. You shouldn't judge people by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character, which is a phenomenal quote and ideal, and something we should definitely live up to. And it really embodies our ideal as Catholics, because we don't see people by like the number of sins that they've committed. We look at them as children of God, like ourselves, made in the image and likeness of God. And because of that, having an inherent dignity that is worthy of respect. And so just looking at how you just perpetuate the idea that some people are less than others because of how they look, because of the way that they live, and just not, you know, getting past that. And I really believe that racism is something that is learned.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Something that is taught. It's not something that we are born with. I even am thinking back to when I was little, I couldn't even distinguish like accents. I didn't notice people talked differently. Like, it clicked because I knew what they were saying. Maybe if they used different words, I noticed that first with like dialects, but like accents were not something I picked up on. The color of skin was not something I picked up on until, you know, someone brings it up and makes, this is a distinction. This person is different. In fact, I remember watching a commercial where a little girl who's African American is at a playground, and this girl who is Caucasian comes up to the playground, and she's like, "Oh, hi!" And they're like, "Let's play." And mom stops her daughter, the Caucasian one. She goes, "Let's not play here." And she goes, "But why?" And it's just so apparent. She just looks at the African American girl, and you just know that she doesn't feel comfortable because she doesn't feel like, it's very apparent of the racism. And there's absolutely like nothing wrong with this child. And this little girl just wants to have a friend.
Yeah, for sure. And
It's-
sorry, go ahead. Okay, I was just kidding. And like sometimes, people might say like, oh, well, like babies stare at people who look different. I mean, babies are curious, like they'll look at things and they notice differences. There's obviously a difference, but racism isn't noticing differences. It, like the racism that we know, racism is seeing that difference and hating it, and
saying
like
it's
being
wrong.
saying it's
Yeah.
less than, saying it's less
Right,
than.
because then that would mean just like by the fact that I refer to you as like, oh, you are, just generically speaking, like I'm saying, oh, you are this, or it's just that would mean that would also be racism, which is not how it works.
It blows my mind how much like controversy like interracial families are still getting
Oh my gosh, yeah.
like today. And like there was a commercial for Cheerios a couple of years ago where a little girl was talking to her mom who was white, and the mom said something about like eating Cheerios is good for you, and the little girl runs to her dad, and her dad is black, and she like tries to shove the Cheerios in his mouth, being like, I want you to live forever. And it was an adorable commercial, and people hated it because it was an interracial couple. And then on Twitter, I saw this on Twitter even like this past Thursday, where a mom was taking a picture of her African child, and she was white, and that's literally all the photo was. It was just, look at me and my beautiful baby girl. And Twitter was just ruthless to her because it started turning into like, oh, there's no dad in the photo, and like it became like, it blew up to such a degree where it was just like, why is there so much like kind of hate in there for something that is like beautiful? Like,
Right.
Yeah. Speaking of Twitter drama, for those of you who are on Catholic Twitter, my girlfriend and I both have Twitter accounts, and one time she, like a month ago, she just uploaded a picture of the both of us. It was just a picture, she like no context, just kind of like, hey, look at us, she's adorable, and I'm all right. So we thought the internet deserved to see us, but and then all of a sudden we got like some some of them are trolls, but a couple of them actually were like honestly thought this. They quoted this something saying that like that interracial couples shouldn't happen, that it's not wrong or it's not sinful, but it should be avoided at all costs because of like cultural differences, and like the child would be upset for being in an interracial marriage or something like that because they like their parents would be two different races or like two different colors or something like that, and it caused this like blow up thing, and it was like we would respond and stuff like that, like not even like taking it seriously half the time because like it's just like, why is this a conversation? Like you said, like why is this a problem at this point? Like I feel like we should be past it, but there's some people who strongly adhere to against interracial relations. Like they're okay with you being with like black or Mexican or whatever, but like if you marry a white woman, I don't know. It's just
It's just really confusing for me. I don't understand that. Like you're not attracted completely to like a person's looks. You're attracted, you fall in love with the person behind them. Yeah. Like who's inside? Like you and your beautiful soul.
Right.
Song reference.
Yeah.
But I recently, last year when Hidden Figures came out, I watched it, and it's about African American women working for NASA and being instrumental in the landing on the moon. And there's some tension because there's no colored bathroom in the building that this African American woman works in. So she has to cross the entire campus just to use the bathroom. It takes her 45 minutes. And you can see just the tension. I can't even use the same bathroom. I have my own coffee pot because I can't share the one that everyone else uses because I'm the only black woman. And just to see that tension is heartbreaking. But at the same time, I just felt so incredibly beautiful because I am like the mixture of those two tensions. And I just feel like a result of God's love. God's love overcame the tension and the hatred and the fear between these two groups, and my parents fell in love with each other, and here I am, and I have a sister, and we're beautiful people because we are a product of love, and that's really all everybody is. Everybody is in existence because God willed it, and between people, and in just such a beautiful way.
I think that's important. What we've heard a lot of so far is just like, you don't fall in love with like the things about you, fall in love with the person. And that's kind of what I want to tie this into, because we're getting kind of like, in a way, philosophical and even theological in a way when we're talking about the beauty of the person and how much the person matters. So I kind of want to like take this and like let's talk about it in regards to our faith as well. I think that could be also like very useful. Like, how should our race, ethnicity, be integral in our faith? What are different ways that like that happens? Like, I mean, because like we're talking about the person and the beauty of that, and that is very philosophical and even theological. Like, how do we like? Let's expand on that.
I think that in looking at how our race and ethnicity, I guess, quite literally paints us in different colors, and how each of those is ultimately a reflection of God, because we are all made in the image and likeness of God. And if we all come in so many different colors, like, can God even be pinned down with how many human beings are on the earth right now, how many have been, and how many are yet to come? Like, just God, just, you know, it really, we're the universal church. Like, it's the ultimate sign of being Catholic, and how we all come from different backgrounds, and we all look different, but we're all human, and we have one God and one faith, and that's what binds us together, like our shared humanity.
So going off of that, and especially to get theological, you know, like you said, we're made in the image and likeness of God. What is God? You know, God is love. That means we are made in the image and likeness of love. Tell me, does love have a color? You know,
Right.
there. And so like, it's silly when you think about like if we're each made in God's image, like then that's why I don't understand how Christians can be racist in that way and see other humans as lesser, because like you're God's creature. You're not even just a creature. You're not like, you know, differentiated in a hierarchy, because we're all human. We're all at the top. You know, like. Yeah, it's baffling. So, yeah.
Yeah, and then it's like an example that I feel like is like when someone of a minority meets another person of their minority, whether or not they have a similar like life experience background, they automatically feel connected. I feel like that's the same with how faith intertwines with race and ethnicity, because you find a Catholic and automatically you have that connection, no matter what race or ethnicity or skin color or life experience you are. Like, you have that connection, like from the beginning.
I cannot tell you how many people that I have met from Franciscan that in meeting them within 5 minutes we are now friends. And I feel so comfortable because we all have the same values and ideals, and we are putting that first just by being on this campus. Well, it's not true for every single person, every single case. For a majority of the people who attend and go to Franciscan, that is true.
Yeah, I think even to a certain extent, like, the roots of the problem with racism stems even through a lot of the different issues we see in society, because the thing that, Zaira, you were talking about, how, you know, when minorities meet each other and they're just like, hey, I'm there, just like, there's this sense of not being alone. And Marc, when you were talking about racism being an attack, like, it's not like it's an attack, okay, racism, but like, why does that hurt? It's because, to use the specific word, Aimee, that you used, different. People like emphasize the different and try to make people feel more alone. That's the attack of the person that it's going for, because in the end, like, whether you're extroverted, introverted, whatever, like, we're made for communion.
Absolutely.
We're made for love. And the whole point of racism is just like, or we could even go farther than racism. We could go racism, bullying, whatever you want to go. It spreads throughout society of like making people feel like they are alone and abandoned and unloved.
And in the universal church, that is impossible.
Exactly.
Right.
Because you are brothers and sisters with everyone who has ever lived, is living, and will live.
Literally united through the Eucharist to everybody who is, being united to Christ. Jesus, literally before he ascends into heaven, is like, go out to all the world and preach the gospel to all nations. I mean, if you want to just put a cherry on top, Jesus wasn't European. You know, it's just it's so many of these different.
Like there are Marian apparitions all over the world.
In
There are
different
different
nations,
kinds.
Different nations,
lords,
right.
all that stuff.
Yeah, so
Yeah, the Black Madonna.
Yeah.
Right.
So like, or he's trying to reach all nations, and so
Yeah, if you're worthy of the gospel, then you're worthy of respect from your neighbor. Is what I say.
Yeah.
So
like, yeah, a big problem is like, I think we're beating each other down for stupid reasons, right? I think we can all agree on that. And that's kind of how I want to go into the last part of this is beating each other down. Another form of that is biting each other's heads off in arguments, right? And right now in our country, in our world, there is this huge going back and forth at each other. So there are some people, maybe because of different experiences in their lives, are very sensitive on this topic, and while being very sensitive and while it can be understandable, sometimes might take like any little thing as being racist where it might not necessarily be so. And on the flip side, you have people, say, maybe very staunch conservatives who are not racist. Maybe they don't quite handle questions right, like we were talking about at the beginning, but are not racist and haven't actually experienced it, so don't understand like why like we're like this is being paid such a big deal. Like think it's such a thing of the past, like nobody actually thinks this anymore, and are getting super mad at people who are pushing this really hard, and everybody's just biting heads. And it's another form of why racism, the racist problem is there, of being angry at each other. Like the problem of biting each other's heads off, which is related, is continually causing division among people in our country and in our world. So like, where do we find the balance, and how do you guys think we can help each other to not bite each other's heads off and like be on the same page with this issue?
I would say that just because something is not directly affecting you does not mean it's not a problem. So you shouldn't think that, oh, just because I'm not dealing with this, like no one should have to worry about it. That's ludicrous in thinking, because like people will have different experience. I mean, Tristan and I, being both Hispanic, will have very complete differences, different experience if we go through the same thing. And so I think one of the ways to talk about, to like kind of fix it and like kind of mend this brokenness that we have, is talking about it and realizing that it is going to be an uncomfortable situation. And that's okay, because we're supposed to be uncomfortable to a certain degree when we are dealing with something that is bad.
Yeah, I think something that also would help prevent inflammatory things and just prevent a bunch of fights and firestorms, as they're called, like in the comments or stuff like that, is it's called waving the red flag. If you guys know American history, it's what the Republicans did after the Civil War, after the North won. And the Democrats, they surrendered. There would still be meetings. The country still had to go on, and there was meetings. And whenever the Democrats would try and do something, ironically, Democrats are typically the ones to support like diversity and stuff like that, but they were like the racist ones in the past, in the South. They were trying to make negotiations with the North and stuff like that, but and sometimes even in the most in the littlest ways, and like if it had nothing to do with the situation, the Republicans would wave the red flag, which would be symbolized as like a bloody rag, and it would be like referencing the Civil War, like you guys were racist and you guys did this and it was awful, and so you're still gonna have to pay for it in this way. So like it would be unrelated to moving forward in progress and that healing. It would always be not just pointing at the wounds of the past, but reopening them and saying like, this is what you did to us, and that's not progress. That's not moving forward with the situation. So there are people on both sides who will say like, look what you did in the past, and because you did this, I deserve this, and they'll or like you deserve to experience the pain. Like, no, that's not moving forward. That doesn't help anyone.
That's not forgiveness either.
Exactly, that is not forgiveness. That is revenge, and God takes care of vengeance and all that stuff like that. We're called to forgive and love as Christ does as well. So like, there's no room for that if you want to seek progress for for people, and equality, not just raising up someone on a pedestal and putting the one who was up there down below. It's equality, lifting all people up.
Absolutely.
I would say that the best thing is two of my favorite words.
Go.
Vulnerability and intentionality. We have to be willing to open ourselves up to the opportunity for hurt in order to get healing. Like if you get a cut and you cover it up and it's infected, and you refuse to let the doctors open up the wound to clean it out and then reseal it, it won't heal well. You'll get sick and it'll just get aggravated. But if you open up the wound, allow the opportunity to really address the reality of the problem and move forward, which would be, the redressing, the healing, the antibiotics, you'll have the reminder that, yes, that existed, which is like when I was growing up, I was like, yes, racism was a thing. I accepted that racism existed. But to me, it was just a scar, a reminder that existed and that we shouldn't go back there again. And unfortunately, we're in a situation where people are refusing to let the doctors, which is technically ourselves, heal ourselves from the infection of racism. And what we need to do in order to fix that is be vulnerable about the problems and the hurt, but also be intentional about trying to fix them and not just trying to talk about it because it's the hot button topic of the week. Like, it's not about, the most clicks. It's not about, oh, look at me, like I'm okay with black people or I'm okay with white people. Yeah. Like, that's not what it's about. What healing is about is saying all people are deserving of respect and all people deserve healing, because honestly, every single race or ethnicity at some point has been oppressed everywhere in the world. So we just need to accept that these are hurts and address the fact that yes, they are real hurts, and then move forward and allow ourselves to heal from that.
So I guess in summary, what I'm guessing the overall point is to one side that is being more extreme on this is, again, like Marc, what you said, just because it's not affecting you doesn't mean it's a problem. But even though the issue of racism itself isn't necessarily the biggest problem, in and of itself isn't the biggest problem in our society, the roots it takes roots so many of the other biggest problems in society. Mm-hmm. The essence of it has that biggest problem in society. And then on the other side, we just need to treat people as human beings and be willing to talk with each other instead of, again, continuing to feed that bad root by biting each other's heads off.
I think one thing that really kind of sums it up, especially talking about roots, is that it is also a matter of pride.
I was actually about to say that.
Racism is, a matter of pride in being, I am better than, fill in the blank. And to really rip up pride by the roots and say, I am human like everybody else, and to really look into the eyes of everybody else, and those that we hurt, those that we push down with our big boots of pride and stomp all over them, is really, it's Jesus. Jesus takes the form of the least of these. When you serve the least of these, you are serving Jesus. And to look at another human being and say, you are not worthy of my attention, or you are the problem, and not looking at, where your interactions contribute to whatever the problem is, and assuming you're right the whole time is, that doesn't solve anything. That's like spitting in the face of Jesus, putting yourself first instead of God first and his children first. The person you should serve last is yourself.
When I was growing up, my mom always said that the goal of life is to find true joy, and joy stands for Jesus, others, yourself, and that's how you should view how to give your life. You give your life to Jesus first, you serve others, and then you serve yourself. That does not mean self-love comes last, but that means that when it comes to choosing between others and between yourself, when it comes to a matter of pride, others should always win. And I also want to make a point with the distinction. I love the point on pride, but I do want to make the distinction that pride doesn't mean you can't have the pride in your culture.
I was actually about to say that.
Yeah.
Because I was about to say there's a difference.
Because pride in your culture
Culture.
is super important to maintain your culture,
Yeah.
and it makes
pride-
like it's a part of your identity and
Yeah.
who
Right.
you really are. But that doesn't mean that just because you love your culture doesn't mean that it's better than another one. It just means that is who you are, and you love who
you're
you are.
celebrating
Yeah.
where you
Yeah.
come from and
And-
who
exactly.
that it made you.
It's
that.
pride in your culture, but not hating the culture of others.
Yeah,
Exactly.
which is
Absolutely.
like
And yeah, I'm glad that Aimee brought up like that. You guys both had those points because it can easily, pride can turn into that.
I'm sure
that-
someone would have said, "What about celebrating like certain types of pride?" And
I
like,
love talking about the fact that I'm Puerto Rican because
Yeah.
no one believes me.
Yeah, and it can easily be brought into like one is superior than the other, which is not true. But you can like definitely have pride in your culture. Like some people say like why is black pride okay but white pride isn't? That's because that there's that wound of
they
of
were taken.
dominance. Yeah.
Well, the fact that it was explained to me why black pride is okay but white pride isn't, because black pride, that's all that they kind of have because they're only African American. They don't know what tribe they came from because they were taken from their tribes in Africa and brought to here. You can be proud of like the fact that you're Irish or German or Italian. Yeah.
That's me. Very
And that's where the pride comes from, and being proud of your heritage. Saying white pride is literally just being proud of your skin color. And
That's the problem.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
it's proud of skin color.
And-
It makes it a physical thing.
yeah.
Yeah, you can be proud of your culture and where you come from. You can be proud you're Polish, or even Jewish is a ethnicity.
Right. Yeah.
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 Like, you can be proud of where you come from, but that doesn't mean you should be prideful.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I would even say it could extend to skin color because like the opposite could be said. I love myself because I'm beautiful because I'm white. In India, they're very like segregatory. Like the very dark Indians, Eastern India are seen as very less than, and like you have to be very like kind of a pale, dark Indian to be like cast in movies in Bollywood or something like that, or to be a celebrity. And acknowledging the beauty in each of the colors that we're all made in, like you said, it becomes a problem when it's superiority, when you say that others are inferior.
Because even God himself, who is the most supreme being, became human, he walked on the earth, he lived the suffering, and he died in the most humiliating and gruesome way.
Completely naked and vulnerable.
He was born into the world very vulnerable.
Aimee, do not support. Do not encourage her. Do not encourage her.
Anybody have any closing remarks, or is that it?
Don't play the race card and love your neighbor.
And love yourself too.
Yeah, exactly.
Because you are beautiful.
Be charitable with your questions.
Yeah.
Seriously.
And be open to learning about experiences other than your own.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much, you guys, for watching this panel discussion. We hope to see you on the next New Catholic Generation panel. Take care, and God bless. Bye, guys.